very impressed over the last couple of years with the way that Mass Audubon has come up with a strategy that really in so many ways does relate to what we are talking about here at the First Parish. It starts from the social justice influence throughout everything that they're doing. But the most important part from my perspective is it's all based on what they call their action agenda. And so this isn't just talking about these issues, this is really doing something about them. And it starts with what Sarah said over and over in her sermon this morning, the trees. Well, what Mass Audubon is doing is protecting those lands and protecting them in communities that really have been deprived of those kinds of experiences in the past. And as you'd expect from me, they're also focusing on climate. And that's why I thought it was great when Heather was willing to come and talk about the advocacy efforts that she's heading and giving all of us an opportunity again to take action. So it's my honor to introduce Heather Packard, and you can take it from here.
Thank you. I need that a lot. So, my name's Heather Packard, and I am a community organizer with Mass Audubon. I've been there for just over a year now. And I'm assuming many of you are very familiar with Mass Audubon, but it is a large organization, about 160,000 members across Massachusetts, been around for 127 years. We are the single biggest private landowner in Massachusetts with over 40,000 acres. Founded originally by a group of women doing advocacy in Boston to not have bird feathers in their hats. So advocacy has been a part of Mass Audubon from the beginning and continues to be. The new program we're launching this last year is called Climate Champions, and it is the first in I never want to say never, because a 127-year-old organization, I'm sure they've probably done something of everything, but always protecting nature has been the mission. And in the last year, we've launched a grassroots advocacy program called Climate Champions. And so this is about people power all across the state, mobilizing both people. You don't have to be a Mass Audubon member to be a climate champion, but we certainly are also very focused on mobilizing our 160,000 members. And so this is an important piece of the action agenda that Andy mentioned. And you can see there we are a program that is advocating for what are called nature-based climate solutions. So I'm guessing some of you might be climate advocates yourself. So raise your hand if you feel like you've done something for climate. Yeah, I mean, most everyone has done something. That's just kind of how more and more, that's how we live, right? I mean, if you can do personal choices, like even as simple as recycling. Some people are getting more and more things. If they own their home, they're able to put solar panels on or heat pumps in it. More and more cars are going electric vehicles, and that's a big push. What's unique about the Climate Champions program, though, is that we certainly, Mass Audubon is all in favor of all of that, but it is important that those choices are made accessible to all people in Massachusetts, because much of that costs. Some of those climate actions take money, or people live in apartments and don't have the authority to choose whether there's going to be solar panels or not on their building, right? So Mass Audubon is looking at climate legislation at the state level, and the Climate Champions are really focused on state climate legislation and on local action in your own community, because that's it's going to take both to move Massachusetts to where we want to go. We're very excited right now. As many of you know, there's a new governor, there's a new climate chief who has just been appointed, the first climate chief ever in any state. So we're really at this really exciting time in our state to have an opportunity to be particularly impactful, I think, on climate issues. And I always like to take a moment too, before we dive into the details of Climate Champions, to just step back and think why state, because I believe that much of the really, I didn't introduce myself, but I'm an active Unitarian at First Parish in Concord. And so I'm on the standing committee and treasurer there this year. So I've been around for many years. My daughter goes through all their RE programs and everything. So I know that this, there is a kind of values-based piece to this that I think is really important. And I think Unitarians can really often feel that connection to nature through their own personal values and to climate action, which I think is just so important. And by working at the state level, it's something it's here, it's at home, it's very accessible. You can go and meet your state legislator in their office, and oftentimes they're from communities, or your representatives are from communities that either your community or ones nearby. And I think that then Massachusetts has a great opportunity to be a role model for other states. And we're not the only state that can do that on climate action. There's certainly other states in the US that are working along those lines, but I think Massachusetts, especially now with the leadership we have, has the potential to really play a strong role, even in essence at the federal level, because once one state, as we role model, you'll see more and more states do something, and oftentimes then you see the federal legislation follows what the states have done. And we've seen that happen time and time again with really progressive legislation a lot of times, right? But it took some states to kind of get it going, and then all of a sudden the Green New Deal might happen, right? And more of the Green New Deal, we're starting to see some of it. But I think that that's an important piece. Is when I feel motivated for Climate Champions and state work, it's partly because I do also see its connection to the federal climate legislation and kind of that piece as a model for other states and kind of lend itself to that work. So, I have to click over here to change the slides. Click the next slide. All right. So Andy mentioned that we have a action agenda. So we have 3 primary goals that I'll show you in a moment, but I just think it's important to know Mass Audubon's kind of big picture. It's a 5-year plan. We launched it 2 years ago to really address the challenges of climate change and the loss of biodiversity. Mass Audubon's mission is to protect nature, and so it's embedded in everything we do. We're most well known for our programs, like day camps and our nature centers, that those are run at. Preschool programs, we have 21 nature centers with like staff and facilities, but we have, there's always, I'm never sure the exact number of we have a lot of other sanctuaries that don't have facilities. I never know the exact number because they're always working on land deals, and I'm never quite sure where they're exactly at on any land deal. They closed it, but it's somewhere between 30 and 35 other sanctuaries that exist that have trails that are open to the public, most of them. So it's a big organization, and we really are able to, I think, leverage ourselves in the state in a very unique way because of our history and that long-term commitment to science. And so our departments, we have a land conservation who's working on those land deals. We have a huge education department, right, who runs all those programs. We also have a conservation science department, and so we're actually doing direct land conservation projects like helping restore the salt marshes on the coast by doing different runneling projects, and that's a whole separate ed session. But we're really on the ground doing the science, and we're doing a lot of data collection and analysis around that to show the loss of biodiversity and the impacts of climate change, so that we aren't just, when we talk to the legislature, we're able to have actual data. And I think that's a really important part, and it's helped us be very well respected across the state. It's something that I really love as a climate activist, to have that whole team of climate scientists and policy experts behind me helping to discuss and plan what is our legislative agenda. And I have a lot of faith. I've been part of Mass Audubon long before I was an employee, and I have a lot of trust in the organization. That they really do. Mass Audubon does a great job in really making sure the science is sound, and that is all connected to our legislative agenda that I'll be showing. So we're working to build on our strengths. We've always had a profound amount of engagement between people and wildlife with Mass Audubon. We have a huge network of volunteers and members. And we also are a very strong organization in coalition and partnerships. So all of our legislation are part of a large each piece of legislation is a slightly different coalition, but they're broad coalitions. And we might play a leadership more, sometimes we are a leader for some of the legislations, other times we're just a strong supporter and a member. But we believe in it, and we let Sierra Club or other wonderful organizations take the lead, right? But we participate in so many of those coalitions and those conversations. So I think that's a really long-term strength of Mass Audubon. So here's our goals. We have resilient landscapes, so really protecting and stewarding the land that I've mentioned that we are responsible for, and then growing that as well. Inclusive and equitable access to nature. So this is a piece that's very strong around environmental justice issues. There's designated environmental justice communities across the state, and we have a new signature program that's launching called Nature in the City. That's not my program, so I'm not going to do a whole spiel on it, but it is very exciting, and that they're really looking to help preserve and provide access to open space in city environments and urban settings. So there's a lot of work going on. We've always done some of that, but now there's a whole program dedicated to it that's just launched also within the last year. We do a lot of educational programs for kids, and so we do some that are after school programs in the cities. Even if we don't have a nature center in that city, we'll have staff do programs in schools. We always have a sliding scale, and scholarship programs, so that kids, that we never want the barrier to be the cost of the program. In some of those communities, so there's a lot of work. And then we do some programs. There's some really cool ones where we're having youth from the cities come out to the nature center and do overnight programs as well, with some of the real inner city, like public schools in Boston. So there's a lot of exciting work going on around this second goal for the action agenda. And then the last one is climate policy, and that's one where the Climate Champions really primarily falls under, although there's connections across all of them, but that is really to help the state achieve full implementation of its 2050 net zero goals. And of course we know that those of you familiar with the climate plan know that at 2025 and 2030 there's intermittent goals, but and we also are looking to help in particular advance policies that reverse the negative health impacts of climate change on low-income residents or communities of color. So this is the environmental justice piece, and really we know that climate change has it is more impactful to communities of color, to environmental justice communities frequently than other non-environmental justice communities, and the state has a definition of that, and we're just using that. There's some debate about that sometimes, but they have a strong program these days. It's strong and growing program around this, so we are very happy to help participate in that as well. So our goals are to train at least 1,000 adults, college students, and youth to become climate champions for climate and conservation policy. And that is where Climate Champions comes in. And we have some strategies around that. Climate Champions is one of them. But I just wanted, we have a policy and advocacy team at Mass Audubon. I'm one member of a team. And we have a variety of strategies. So Climate Champions, grassroots advocacy, people power is one, and it's an important one, but it isn't the only one, right? There's a lot of different ways you can influence policy and legislation. So we have direct lobbying, where we have some of the staff that work with me are paid lobbyists who have worked for years in the State House and are very familiar with the representatives and senators and knowledgeable when and how and who we can say the right thing at the right time and be influential more in the one-on-one type lobbying. And we certainly do that and participate in meetings. We do sometimes have big lobby days, which is really fun. We often it's always been in a coalition setting. So we just participated in one on March 15th that Mass Rivers was organizing around a drought bill. And we're on those calls. So there's a lot going on around that, and there's a big campaign we're working on called 1 Billion for Nature and Climate. And this is 1 billion, just to be clear, this isn't money coming to Mass Audubon. This is just generally, we're advocating for the state to dedicate $1 billion for any sort of climate or nature protection, all right? So a lot of that has been funding, and that's where we get in advocacy on, I think many of you are probably, I'm assuming you're kind of in the know, but familiar with how there isn't direct, funding in the state budget for a lot of climate projects, like MVP, the Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Program, is a state program. It's, the acronym is MVP, which I thought was most valuable player when I first heard. But it's not, it's a climate, it's a program where the towns can basically access state funds. They have to, go through some process to get there, but they can then once they're enrolled, they can access state funds to do climate work in their town, which is great. But that MVP program is not in the state budget. It's not built in that it all automatically is getting funding. So there's this kind of constant need to advocate to get it funded, right? And so that's what this $1 billion for nature, that's an example of, we did a lot of advocacy to get funding for MVP, to make sure that grant program stays fully funded. Because there are it is used a lot, most towns in Massachusetts now, there's a few standouts, but almost every town in Massachusetts has gone through the process to become enrolled in the grant program there. All right, communication, of course, is a piece. We do social media. We do a lot of thought leadership. We have big reports we're working on. There's one coming up called Gaining Carbon that I'll talk a little bit more later, but it is an important piece. It's where we take that data and that work we are doing, data collection on different projects, and really are able to write very detailed scientific reports to prove that some of the things that we know are important to help move climate legislation through. Power mapping, so grass top strategy is, so there's grassroots that is like on the ground with all the people. Grass tops is that where somebody knows someone who is really influential, and so we work with our board of directors like Andy or others who have had many, sometimes for many years, relationships with public officials or decision makers who have influence to really move certain pieces of legislation or town policy through in certain towns. So that's kind of the grass tops level. And then grassroots, a whole network of climate champions. So we've just tipped over 400 climate champions statewide, and we are continuing to recruit, and the program grows. I get probably one sign up at least a day right now. Since this spring, it's kind of picked up. And a piece of that is that I've been advocating and promoting the program internally because you were launching. So even the staff weren't as familiar with Climate Champions. So I've spent a lot of time last fall, and even in the spring, originally just talking to the board and some of the leadership, and then I started really working with the staff last fall, and it's paying off. I'm seeing more and more opportunities like this where a board member says, hey, come and talk to my church, or we have a lot of staff, who, when we have visitors come through all these sanctuaries, they're talking about the program now because they're knowledgeable about it. And I think that's where most of these new signups have been coming from. But we are still growing our advocacy muscle in each of these areas. It is, while Mass Audubon has done it for quite a while, the policy and advocacy team does have room to grow and learn and get better. So we're working at it. So Climate Champions. This was our one in-person lobbying opportunity. Most legislators they want virtual anymore. It's really hard to convince them to let you meet at the State House. Most of them will shy away from it, but we did get one. Last June, we did a lobby day, and this was the only one that was in person. And I'm there with the group and meeting with the senator. So grassroots volunteers are statewide. We're working on advocating for nature-based climate solutions. And that means things to protect land, habitats, and wildlife. We work with public officials to organize and attend community events, recruit more climate champions, and direct meetings with our legislators. All of this is helping those two big buckets of legislation I talked about, which is reducing emissions so we can hit our net zero goals in the state, across the state by 2050, and reversing negative health impacts for environmental justice communities. And I thought I'd just introduce you to one person so you can kind of get a picture. This is one of our climate champions, meet Kevin Izzo. He is joined last year. He's been around for almost a year now, so he's pretty much joined as soon as we launched Climate Champions, and has been really he really has enjoyed being able to participate with all our action opportunities. So he's researched our local adoption of the MVP program. He was looking into that, and if it turned out his town didn't have it, so he'd been getting involved a little bit to try and get MVP, this program that I was mentioning, passed in his own town. He's written letters to influence building code design to try and have green building codes, so we stop building buildings with like fossil fuel hookups in it, right? And so that's, new buildings at minimum. It seems like we should not be doing that, and so there's been some activism around that with Mass Audubon and opportunities to weigh in, and he's done that. He actually, and this was a big ask, I asked people last fall, all my climate champions, I said, would you be willing to help phone bank with the Environmental Voter Project? I don't know if you're familiar with that group. Mass Audubon partners with them around elections because they're nonpartisan, and Mass Audubon is nonpartisan. And so the Environmental Voter Project advocates for people to vote, but it advocates for in a very smart way, in my opinion, to have people vote who have flagged environmental issues as their top concern over any other concern in exit polls previously. So we know they care about the environment. They advocate for people who have been inconsistent voters, so they don't worry about people who vote all the time, and they don't worry about people who never vote. They're the people who need encouraged to vote, right? And we know they might. And so we did those phone banks, and Kevin did them. I was so impressed. I didn't have a ton of climate champions, I will admit. I think there were about 8 climate champions who did phone banks, but we each talked to it was kind of amazing. You do on one round of it, you'll talk to 50, 60 people. So we did it twice on 2 different days all together. We actually met in person at Drumlin Farm because it's more fun to do it together. So that was great. Solar siting, that's what the Gaining Carbon report is about. We had an opportunity to participate in a survey. They were saying, where should you site your solar panels? And they were asking the public. So we asked everyone to weigh in. There was a link provided by the state. So we did that. He helps recruit. He does work on, right now we've been reaching out to legislators to co-sponsor a slate of 8 bills that Mass Audubon has identified as top priority bills for us around climate. And so we have a slate of 8 that I'll be sharing with you, and asking them to co-sponsor. Oh, he also does recruitment. He's fabulous recruitment. He staffs occasionally I get especially right now with Earth Day coming up, I've had so many tabling requests. So he's been helping with the ones in his region, which is great. So, what have we done in the past? I bet some of you have done some of these. So I'm curious, did you help when there was a huge amount of investment put into, it was through the Economic Development Package. It actually passed last fall, but had been advocated for 6 months, if not more. And $540 million in investments ended up being dedicated to climate and nature, including funding for MVP. So that was one of our huge wins last year, but it wasn't just us. Some of you might very well participate with other organizations on it. It was something that had been an advocacy ask by many, and it is a climate movement, right? We're part of it. So many organizations were advocating to get this funding for climate and nature. That there was a lot of money that was being decided upon during the budget cycle, and then it got delayed, and it ended up not getting voted in. I think it was in early November, right before the election, end of October. We have, I'm sure some of you participated in the big landmark climate bill that passed last August, right? So of course, climate champions were weighing up. The governor let it sit on his desk for 10 days, and we were all like, don't veto it. It was such an important piece of legislation, and I couldn't believe Baker was even considering it, because he has done a lot of climate work, and it was not the kind of thing I thought he'd want to be his legacy, to veto the climate bill in his last days, But he did eventually, thankfully, sign it. But there were a lot of organizations, and Mass Audubon was certainly one of them, that were advocating for that. We've worked on natural and working land policy. So the climate plans, if you've ever read there's a nice executive summary. These big, huge reports, I love executive summaries. And so I've read through it. I've read the whole report too, but if you want to just glance at it, the executive summary is still pages long, but it has nice chapters and headings, and the big climate plan for Massachusetts has an entire section dedicated to natural and working lands. It is the shortest section of the plan, because I just don't think they really had, when they were in the process of writing, it feels like they hadn't quite figured it all out yet, and they put some stuff in there, but it is, a lot of the other sections about how to go, green our grid, right? There's a lot more detail and planning that went into that, and plan and goals and things written. Natural work lands was a little lighter, and so we've been working, Mass Audubon has been very active in participating in that, because obviously that's an area we have a lot of expertise, right? Natural, how to preserve, protect, conserve natural working lands. I don't know if you guys have done any of these others, but I think there's a lot that has been going on, and many of these continue through this year. So we have legislative priorities. We're working on right now. The legislative session started in January, and we have, I mentioned there were 8 bills for co-sponsorship, although co-sponsorship is, you can still ask your legislator to co-sponsor right now. But it is that season of co-sponsorship is kind of waning, and we're starting to talk about hearings. All the bills have been now moved from, they were filed in January, have actually been given to a particular committee who is going to organize and schedule hearings. That's kind of where we're at in the process. And they're just starting to schedule hearings. Like, there's hints of hearings coming by the end of the month, though, soon. And then there'll be a lot more kind of in May. And so we are in the process of advocating around development of renewables. So we have an offshore wind bill that we've been participating in, and solar siting, and again, that's S-I-T-I-N-G, like where it is physically located. So where are they putting these huge ground-mounted solar arrays is a question. There are a lot of goals in the climate plan around solar energy, and the easy answer is to cut down a bunch of trees on public land that they own and put up a big solar array, and that because they own them and it's easy, and that's what's been happening more and more. And so we have a bill to say, please don't do that. Please use what's called disturbed or built land instead. So putting them over parking lots, on top of buildings, on road cuts, brown land, contaminated land. So there are other ways to do it, and this is where I want to just mention gaining carbon. So the report is that we're working on is in partnership with Harvard Forest. It is a academic study using GIS mapping models to show that Massachusetts, can meet the solar and the natural and working land goals that are in the climate plan, and that you don't have to cut down the trees to put those solar arrays up. We can meet our solar goals without cutting down forests. And people thought that, but they had, again, this is where I love Mass Audubon. It has a very data-focused model. We actually did the work and did the science and evaluated all the land, literally like acre by acre across the state with mapping in partnership with Harvard Forest, and can prove that we actually can, with using disturbed and built lands, meet these goals. So that report's coming out in June, and we'll be doing a lot of advocacy around that in the future to get our legislators to read, or at least the summary, the policy recommendations that are associated with the report. So that is one of our big, solar siting is something that Mass Audubon's taken a real strong leadership role in advocating with. The next section about wetlands and droughts, we advocated for drought with Mass Rivers. Mass Rivers is really probably taking the lead on a lot of the drought management bills, but we're very invested in it. It's really important. It allows the state to say water conservation regulations during drought can be implemented gives them the authority at the state level to make water conservation instead of at the town level. Because of course drought doesn't stop at municipal boundaries. It's based on watersheds and much broader. And so right now it's at the, being able to manage a drought is at town by town. That's kind of how it's set up. Another bill is wetland restoration, regulation, streamlining. So we need to restore wetlands in Massachusetts, and we've been losing them at an alarming rate, actually. And restoring the wetlands is sometimes as simple as taking out a dam that isn't really needed anymore, right? So there are different ways, there's all different, depending on the wetland, what you need to do to restore it. But wetlands do carbon sequestration, which is a really important part of the climate solution, is to make sure we continue to sequester carbon. We know we won't, at this point, because we've squandered kind of the last 20 or 30 years, we can't meet our 2050 goals without some sequestration. Like that, they know, they've done the math, and there's charts showing that and in the climate plan. So we are advocating to try and keep wetlands for that reason, but also because it's an important part. We know that's an important part of biodiversity and habitat. It is a really critical piece of protecting nature and wildlife. So we are our advocates and often even are the lead on the actual project. Again, Mass Audubon has the staff who literally do the wetland restoration. We can actually be the ones on the ground doing it. And it turns out that getting permits to do wetland restoration is extremely complicated. There are like multiple agencies, state agencies, local agencies, clear up to like Army Corps of Engineers. Like there are like multiple agencies that get involved and have authority even over what gets done on wetland restoration, that you have to go through all these steps to get anything done. Other states have figured out ways to streamline it for people who are looking to do restoration and continue to keep the complicated process for developers. Because that's really why it exists, right? Is to protect the land, to protect the wetlands. But we're not here to, we want to grow the wetlands, much less protect it, right? We want more wetlands. So some other states have figured out ways to have a more streamlined process for restoration type work. And you have to go through a lengthy initial process to get approved as one of those types of organizations, but once you're there, you can go through the process much more quickly. So we're looking to try and help make that happen. I talked about funding already a bit, but one thing I think that's really interesting and might be for you guys as Unitarians that really care about racial equity and diversity is that the investments in climate and nature, we do need to stop having to advocate every time we want a funding for a climate project, like the MVP. We need to, it should be part of the budget. There should be a constant sustainable stream of funding through some sort of fee or tax or something. There was a lot of conversation. So over the course of almost 2 years, in a broad coalition that included a lot of environmental justice groups, at EJ Table, if somebody's familiar with it, were very strong and active in this coalition, to say what would that fee be? You know, because it's really important that it is not only sustainable but equitable. And so you don't want the burden of that fee to go on communities that are already struggling, right? And so what they ended up coming up with was a fee, a surcharge on homeowners and casualty insurance policies, and it's actually a tiny fee for most homeowners. I don't even think we'd notice it, but collectively it will make a solid stream of funding that is so important as we move forward with climate. We have to start finding ways to do that. Maybe there'll be other ways in the future as well. I think we probably will need more money than what that will bring, because we know we know that it's going to take more money to really do all this work. But this was the first step, and I think a really important piece of that was the kind of equity piece that is associated with it. So I'm really excited about that. And the last piece is a lot about there's just some really big broadcasted pesticide issues in a variety of ways. There's some rodenticides. Now rodents are terrible, and some communities have been, I think it might be a climate, it's so hard to know what is for sure a climate impact, but there are some communities that really have had a huge increase in rodent issues. And so we have to acknowledge, we have to control rodents. Nobody wants rats, right? But there are some very big broadcasted rodenticides that are done by pest control companies that are particularly, there's certain types that are more dangerous to wildlife because of how long they live. The rat will live longer and continue to ingest it, so that when and it was in the news actually into February, a bald eagle ate a rat and died from it. I said, you're nodding, yeah, it was all in the news. But it's, it's foxes, it's hawks, it's any of these predators that would eat a rat as prey, right? But it's because the rat doesn't die right away. If the rat died right away, it probably wouldn't have, and some pesticides do that, and the amount of poison in the rat would not be enough to kill the predator, or the hawk or whatever. But when they don't die quickly, they keep ingesting the bait, and eventually they build up enough in their system that when later they die and something eats them, then we see wildlife being secondary unintended victims. I mean, it's not like the pest control company plans that either, but this bill is to really just regulate that particular slow-acting rodenticide. And then we know there's a lot around pollinators and the bees. We've all heard of colony collapse. We know there's a lot of challenges around that. So this is a bill to help support some of the work that we need to do to protect wild bees as well. And mosquito control, again, broadcast of pesticides are never a great idea for wildlife and nature, right? So there's some bills to help discuss how and kind of regulate certain methods that can help cause problems for wildlife, all right? So those are our kind of core 8, but there are a top 3 that I just want to mention as we move forward and really start to mobilize climate champions. We're just in the process now to switching, I mentioned, from co-sponsoring, which was all 8. And so as we really start to organize and do presentations, and we're going to be doing a lot of different things locally and statewide, the 3 big bills are the wetlands, streamlining the restoration, the solar siting bill, and the rodenticide bill. And those are the 3 that, for climate champions, grassroots people power is a good strategy. All the other bills will still be there. I've showed you other strategies. Mass Audubon will continue to advocate for them in other ways. But for climate champions, my niche, for grassroots people power, we're going to be focusing on those 3 kind of going forward. So, I'm going to wrap up. We have opportunities to get involved. So we do a lot of training. A big piece of what we do with climate champions, we have people who come in with all different skill sets, but we have to assume that it's our responsibility to train someone who's brand new, okay? Because there are actually I would say well over 50% of the climate champions have never done any of this before and are just needing to learn, like, oh, I'm gonna call my senator or meet with my senator, like they've never done anything like that. So that's fine, and that's great, and we're supporting, and we are big believers in doing that with others. Don't do it by yourself, and showing and giving people opportunities to start that engagement, even if you have never done it before. We also have some who could run those meetings, and that's fabulous. We ask Andy to help facilitate meetings sometimes with senators and others who have done this before, right? There's some of you, I'm sure, who have met with your legislators and feel comfortable talking with them or hosting a meeting. And so when we have somebody like that, we'll have them bring along some others who are newer, right? And everyone can get an opportunity then to participate, and numbers matter. I think that's the biggest message I can say. Grassroots people power is so important. We have seen over and over again in this country that the way we really are going to get this type of climate legislation through, you have to have the people behind it. And it can be awareness building sessions about a particular bill, or it could be actual direct lobbying with your legislators, working at the town level to implement some of those projects, because a lot of the projects that we're trying to get funding for need implemented locally. All of those are great ways to get involved, but we just encourage everyone to try to step out and do something. And Climate Champions is a place where we'll support you. Mass Audubon will help help provide the training and supports at whatever level and comfort you are to engage on climate. But it provides some really easy action opportunities. We have things called action alerts, where it's just literally is a button. We have here's this pre-written email. There's a part that you can edit if you want, but if you've been involved in any kind of advocacy and signed up for any of those, probably how many of you have gotten those emails from? It could be climate, it could be democracy advocacy. There's all kind of movements, right? We have that technology as well. So sometimes it's just super simple to click that button, and we already have a lovely email going off to somebody who needs to do something to protect climate and nature. Other times, there are meetings and there's ways to get involved. So next steps is we are really looking to have Climate Champions help, and you can sign up just to find out what's going on. There's a monthly e-newsletter, right? That's the super easy first level. If that's, you just want to kind of it's once a month only email, get a sense of what's going on with policy and advocacy. And that includes other things besides Climate Champions, like what is our team reading? What is the current legislative update on our bills? And it gives all kinds of updates. But I just think as a Climate Champion, if you're interested in signing up, I would love to have you. I can stay after and answer questions. I have bookmarks on the table that have a QR code and the website, so you could sign up later or you could sign up right now. But in the end, what you end up doing is typically most Climate Champions do one meeting, one training, and one action every month. That's pretty much what most Climate Champions do. We have a hub meeting. We have a training that we usually do statewide. This month, our statewide meeting is next Wednesday, or this coming Wednesday. this Wednesday. I've been traveling, I don't know what day it is. This coming Wednesday. And we will be having a training on how to do testimony at a hearing, because most testimony can be submitted by writing, written testimony. So all you have to do is write, and we'll have a sample and a training on it. Why you believe in any of this legislation, and we're gonna be really focusing on the top 3. We're gonna ask everyone to try and take some time over the next month, to take our sample, write your own, and then you're ready whenever the hearing happens. Hearings sometimes only have 72-hour notice, which I find, I'm always surprised by things. That's the state legislature. So it's great to already have it ready, right? And we can prep it in advance. So we're gonna do a training on that this coming Wednesday. And so that's the kind of things we do, all right? And so we would love to have you join us, and we make it as easy as possible to take climate action with Mass Audubon. Thank you so much. So I'll take, if you have questions, you can ask questions. There's bookmarks on the table that look like this. If you want to read up on it on the website. Yep.
I have a comment.
Great.
And that is, thank you, you've been great today. It's really fun to hear about all these things. I used to work in the field, and so it's just fabulous. But I did want to say that on April 30th, the Democratic Town Committee is inviting everyone to come and hear Mike Barrett.
Oh.
And Mike Barrett is one of the great climate change people. And this is a series of 3 meetings that Democrats have opened the town to. And we had our 2 state reps come, and we're having Barrett come. And in each one of these meetings, climate change has been very, very big on everyone's heart. And especially at the last meeting with our state rep, people were very concerned that the expansion of Hanscom was going to set the roadmap back. And so I hope you will all come and talk with Senator Barrett. He'll give a presentation, and then there'll be questions from the floor. And that's April 30th at Bemis at 4 o'clock.
I'm sorry, what time? Yeah.
4 o'clock on April 30th at Bemis. And I will be sending out, you can be assured, thousands of reminders.
I live in Concord, so that's my summer here too.
Oh, you can come too.
Yeah, I know. I want to come. That's great. Yes.
Those trainings that you offer, are they recorded, and are they
Oh.
things that we can send out in our newsletters and things?
Yes, they are definitely recorded. We always record so many climate. We have over 400 climate changes, but not. I mean, who's going to be nowhere near 400 are going to attend on Wednesday at 6:30 on a weeknight. Like, we know this. They're all volunteers. We're busy juggling how many different commitments in our lives, and so we do everything we can to make sure this Climate Champion volunteer program is as accessible as possible. So they're certainly recorded, and we share links to the PowerPoint slide and to the slide deck itself, and also to the recording. So if you want to just look at the slides, you can, or you can watch the whole meeting, the training. So we do that with every Climate Champion meeting. Yeah.
I just wanted to almost repeat one thing you said, well, maybe 2 things. One is, I think it's just amazing you've gotten 400 volunteers so far. But when I've talked to some people about it, it's, and you tell me if I'm pushing too much hype here, that by just spending really a total of an hour, 2 hours a month, you can make a real difference.
Yeah.
It was great to see that guy who seems to be all in on it,
Yeah.
but I didn't want people to be misled that you have to, spend 40, 50, 100 hours or whatever he's doing.
Kevin probably only spends 2 to 3 hours a month too. Honestly,
That's what,
he's just been doing it for a year, so he had a long list of things he's done. But
Yeah.
each month, he's done one of those or something, with training and support.
that's what's so amazing,
Yeah.
I think, about this program is, you've got 2 full-time people plus an intern who
Yeah.
are supporting everybody,
Yeah.
doing 90% of the work.
But the Climate Champions step up and provide leadership too. So we do have a leadership team who, and this is only if people have that does take a little more time. But it is, I'm a very big believer in volunteer programs always having local, internal leadership opportunities and have a team approach. So it's shared responsibilities, because I know I'm a volunteer for my church, I'm a volunteer for things outside of my job. And I know you really do need a shared model of leadership in a volunteer organization. So we have leadership teams who help me where I wouldn't be able to do it. Yeah. But it is easy. It really is. We do everything I can, and everyone can choose how much they do, right? You can just do the action alerts that are like a click of a button, or you can come to the meetings. I'm fine with all of that. If people sign up to Climate Champions, you'll get those opportunities, and you will choose to engage in what you have the time and opportunity to do so. And that's fine with me, because I understand that everybody is juggling all of life commitments. We all have, a variety of things, and even health or whatever. I mean, we all have peaks and valleys where you have more time and energy to do things. And so the program is designed to allow for that. Yeah.
I really appreciate your calls to action, and I'm with the Democratic Town Committee, and what I do with your calls to action is I rewrite them a little bit so they seem a little different, and then I send it out and I say to people, hit reply if you want to sign, and we can often get 30 signatures by just hitting reply. They don't have to do any work, they can just hit reply. But I think it's very important to do this, and we do have a relationship in town with our legislators. And
It's great. I'll tell you, Sam Anderson is the Director of Government and Legislative Affairs, so he has this big title. But Sam is fabulous. I report to him. He's part of the team. He's a colleague, and he worked for Senator Barrett as his senior legislative aide for the last 15 years. He came on board with Mass Audubon a year and a half ago now, I guess. Prior to that, he worked for others, reps, and so he had probably a good 20, 25 years of experience working in state legislature. And so, I learned so much from him because he's an insider. You kind of get this totally different perspective when you talk to Sam, which I love. And one of the things he's told me is that if a legislator gets as many as 10 comments or requests or questions from their constituents about any topic, they will almost always at that point, that's all it takes for them to turn to him, when he was a legislative aide, turn to one of their staff and say, will you look into this? What's going on with this?
right.
You know?
You
10!
You neglected to mention the most important qualification about Sam Anderson.
What is
He
that?
grew up in Lincoln.
Oh, yeah, he did. Yeah, he's also a Harvard-educated attorney.
That's
Yeah.
beside
He's brilliant. But, yeah, and he lives nearby too still, and his family's from around here. Yeah. So, and he's the one who actually, I think, met with some of you and recruited me kind of to come. So, had the idea that I could come today. Yeah.
I'm just really impressed with everything Mass Audubon is doing. And you have this, sounds like this incredible network of volunteers. And I'm a little concerned about the Hanscom mission coming up so quickly, and the infrastructure that you've already built isn't there to support moving it towards the governor's desk to get it in front of her, because she's the only one that can veto Hanscom's growth. Is there any, when you talk, I didn't hear Hanscom come up, and I just wonder if there's any way that there could be some kind of collaboration, because it's such an impact on the
Regionally, yeah, I agree. I mean, I don't know how many people are familiar with it, but Hanscom is planning to expand 27 hangars, all for super emitter private jets. So it is a very, critical issue, kind of for the whole state, but certainly it's very regionalized. But this area, Metro West has really been organizing around it, and there are citizen groups working on it. I think Mass Audubon so one of the ways we've organized Climate Champions is we have regional hubs. So we have a Metro West hub that meet separately than the big statewide training. So that one meeting a month is to organize more regionally. And we are just in the process of pulling together the leadership teams for Metro West who would help us identify a local issue. We're not going to be able to fight every local issue, sadly. Or we're not going to be able to mobilize around it, across the whole state, because there's so many. Oh, there's this development. I think Winchendon is cutting down 70 acres for or proposing it, or just finishing it. I forget where they're at in the present, for a ground-mounted solar array. I mean, we hear from people. Mass Audubon and the policy team hear from hundreds a month of our members about things going on. So we, until we have the Climate Champions to help mobilize, the 6 employees at Mass Audubon can't do it. And so we really have been trying to grow the Climate Champion program so we could do more of that local regional mobilization, and we're just starting to do it. If the Climate Champions for Metro West chose to mobilize around that, I would totally support it.
Why don't we conclude as a group, and if you
Yeah.
have further.
Yeah, and I would love to, I'll stay if anyone has questions. Don't forget to grab your bookmarks so you can sign up. I'd love to see some of you at future meetings maybe, or join you for an action.
Thanks.
Thank you. Just a note, we are having another forum presentation next Sunday after worship. It will be led by myself. We're going to be having a conversation around the inclusion and understanding of trans and non-binary identities, and particularly as a faith community, what does it mean in a culture, in a context where trans and non-binary folks are being really targeted culturally? What does it look like for us to be a truly welcoming, open and welcoming community congregation for trans and non-binary folks? So hope you'll join us for that.
I just loved your talk. I used to head Riverways, which now became the ecological restoration program. So it was one of the 4 things. And I worked with Julia for years.
Yeah, I was gonna say, you partnered with Mass Audubon.
Forever. Mass Audubon saved us. Chris Harding, who was the legislative person at Mass Audubon,